Good morning. We continue the summary and conclusion in the conclusion of Ayin Beis, volume 3, and we are on page 1435. Aleph Taf Lamed Hey. So after explaining how malachim, messengers, you can call them God's supervisors, ambassadors, different names we gave for them.
Am I the only one who can't hear the rabbi now? My screen is frozen, but I'm overseas. Can anybody hear me?
Aye, we hear you.
We hear you.
Did you freeze for anybody else or just me?
It's just you.
Okay, I have bad internet here. I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting.
Okay. That the qualification is that the Sheirish of Neshamas Yisrael hu l'mayla harbe malachim. It's much higher than malachim. Like I explained yesterday in the previous class, just because the Neshamas need the support of the malachim, that doesn't make the malachim higher than Neshamas. It's just something that the Neshamas contribute. Like the words he used earlier when he started the whole subject, he said that even though Neshamas are higher than malachim, just going back to the language he used earlier, which was on page 14. Let's see here. Just a moment, please. That even though Yisrael b'chinas ein l'mayla harbe malachim, Makol Mokim yesh mayla gam kein b'malachim. There's a quality that the malachim serve. Like I gave the example, for example, in the palace, the king has his family and his children, and they have ministers or attending agents that help them out, that educate them, that take care of them, that feed them. They do play that role, even though the neshamas are higher than the malachim. And he explains, and that's what we're middle of, what is the difference between malachim and neshamas, and gave several different ways to explain it. Well, not different ways, they're all consistent, but several different expressions in the difference. And I'll just sum them up quickly. One is that the neshamas are rooted in etzem, atzmus ein sof, malachim in ispashtus ha'er, the extension. Neshama, in the letters, in the context of letters, Eisis ha-machshava neshamas, machshava to yourself. Eisis ha-dibur malachim. Malachim come from zivug neshikin. What distinguishes them? Because the zivug, the connection comes from the kiss, from a cosmic divine kiss. And neshamas come from zivug gufni, comparatively speaking, a zivug gufni, an attack connection on a bodily level, which of course here doesn't mean physical, but it means it's much more intimate, much more connected in the fullest sense of the word, whereas neshikin is only his pashtus. And he gave the example between the difference in hashpah of seichel of a teacher to a student, and the tipa, the seed that a parent gives to a child. That's atzmus moyach ha'av, and that's why also in Aveda, neshamas is lishtaba begufa de malka. They get absorbed in the very guf of the king, because they're one with him, like they're part of his DNA. You don't say that in malach. And then he brought the posuk and the zayir on the posuk, which is the basic, most of the explanation on the first half of page 1435 that we learned in the previous class. Beis Yaakov lechuva nelcha ba'er avaya, that the house of Yaakov travels ba'er avaya. Let us go and travel with the eir. What's the eir avaya? So he explained the eir avaya several ways, but we're talking about neshamas because it's Beis Yaakov. Eir avaya is naud yotzem Eden. It's chochmah and bina, Abba ve'ima, that goes into Zoh, which is Havaya, so it's Eir Havaya. It's higher than just Havaya, it's Eir Havaya. And he says that's the level of Pnimiyah Zoh, which is connected to Primis HaKav, from the inner dimension of the Kav, connected to Teferes HaNelam, the Teferes HaNelam, which is a Primis HaKeser, Mechus V'atzmus Ein Sof. Then he says even further, in Zohar, and the Rabbah says the Eir Havaya is Arich Ampin, and then even more than that, the level of Atik, Atika, Atik Ye Atik. And he brought that from the Eir, Lukutetera, the level of Atik. And Atik itself, like we learned earlier, Ein Sof itself is Malubish and Atik. So that tells you how high neshamas are rooted, and that connects back to what we learned. That you're talking about Chevy and Eza Atzmus, the Bitl Ba'achdus Hashem. Gam Yashleim, it's also the level of Ave B'tainugim, love with pleasure. And that's Beis Yaakov, L'chu v'nelcha Be'er Hashem, L'shtab B'gufa D'malka, Primis V'atzmus Ein Sof. And he connected to the Nitzitz Cotton, that the Yechida of the Neshama is connected to Yachid, that's even higher than Yechida. That's the level of Neshamas. Now he's going to continue, and I'll continue reading from middle of the page, the line that begins in Neshama, page 1435. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. And he says, Mashenken HaMalochim, that's all Neshamas. Malachim, on the other hand, Avedosam, who b'chinas ispashtus, who b'chinas achetzenius levad. Their Aveda is more in the extension, the expression of Elikus, not in the core. Like I mentioned, for example, this child, or the prince, the king's child, he's part of the etzem of the king. But all the accrements and all the support system around him, that would be called ispashtus. And chetzenius levad. Let's not forget it's ispashtus chetzenius of Elikus. So we're not talking about chetzenius as in something superficial, or what's the word I want to use? That's superficial or shallow. You're talking about chitzenius, but it's not the kavana itself. It's not the kavana. It's not the atzmis. Ukiyadua, and now he's going to explain where do we see this avodah of malachim. What is the main avodah of malachim? We know that avodah of malachim is to sing shira, song. That's why we say kodesh, kodesh, kodesh. They sing God's praises, and they get completely consumed. The Shrafim literally get consumed with a passion, the love and reverence of the divine, and the same thing with all the malachim. They also have other shlichus, and like we learned there, malachim serve as digestive system. We learned malachim that serve as yadayim v'raglayim, like arms and legs, and of course malachim and shluchim that come with God's messages to Avram or to Yaakov or to Yitzchak, or to the different people in the history. So he says now, Ukiyadua, the Avedas HaMalachim, Hurina v'zimra b'shiras v'tishbachas. The Aveda Malachim, and he means here the primary, the general Aveda of Malachim, is Rina v'zimra. It's two words for the word song. Some say Rina is song without words, Zimra is with words, or with instruments. But here obviously he's not talking about physical instruments, but Rina v'zimra b'shiras v'tishbachas, with song and praises. Shvach, tishbachas. Kamei Perek Shira. Like we find there's one of the more classic Torah texts is called Perek HaShira. It's a chapter called the chapter of song. And there it talks about how every creature has its own unique song that it sings in praising God. So he says, Shekol Abruim Oimrim, that all creatures say these songs. V'chein ha-malachim, adrei ma-mailas. And so too the malachim. So every creature sings its song. That's why it even says the sun, for example. Why does it say shemesh begiven doim? When Yeshua was fighting the battle, and he wanted to have more sunlight because he wanted to finish the battle before the night falls, so he prayed and said, shemesh begiven. The shemesh in Given is the city where they were located. Doim should be silent. What does that have to do? He should have said the shemesh should stop in the sky and not set, which did happen. So the Mefarshim explained, because the shemesh travels with its song. It sings God's praise. And that's what causes it that's why when you sing, you see there's a vibration, there's movement in song. So what causes the sun to move? It's not just the gravitational pull, it's because of the song. So what Yeshua was saying is, sun, be silent. If the sun falls silent, it won't move, and it will remain where it is. So just an example how every creature sings its song to God. And indeed, today we know, you look, very often you hear the sounds of nature, you see the unique sounds of different creatures. So we think the sounds are just to find a mate, or to threaten an enemy, or whatever it may be, or to defend itself. But the sounds can also reflect the songs that each creature sings. The same as with malachim, the angels. Adre mamaylis, not just the lower, but to the highest of levels. Malachim Aveda is Shira v'Zimra, Rina v'Zimra rather. Ukamoy halus Hashem min hashamayim, halu b'mreimim. Like we say every day in Pesukah de Zimra, halus Hashem min hashamayim, they praise God from heaven. Who's praising God from heaven? The angels. Hallelu b'mreimim. And they praise Him b'mreimim in the higher exalted states. The Inyan Harina, and this idea, this song, who gili eitzem chukosam. Why does someone sing? When you see song is a form of longing, gaguim. You know, you long for something. The song expresses the soul's longing. The same thing with the creatures. And the malachim, he says, it's a revelation of the eitzem chukosam, the intense, or you can say the essential, the powerful and intense chukah, yearning, longing, lias nichsecha, nichsefa v'gam kolsa nafsham, that they should, there's a glusten in Yiddish, you say. They aspire to, they yearn. V'gam kolsa nafsham, it's a pasuk in Tehillim. And also their nefesh expires. Kolsa from the word kiloyin, like when you say a wick, the kiloyin hashemen rather, when oil gets absorbed and drawn into it's kiloyin hashemen that creates the flame. So the absorption, and therefore the essentially the nullification of nafsham, the dofka is barach, to be attached itself to Hashem. Al yedei hilulim hahilulim, through these praises, the hallelu, shema halalim u'meshapchim es Hashem, that they praise and they compliment God. Shemazen nase ispailas nafsham laHashem, which causes them to have an excitement, a stimulated excitement, their souls to God. Like you see, when you value someone and you really appreciate them and you express, especially with song, their praises, that indeed, that helps support, that helps express and also feeds that the willingness, the wish to connect and the longing to connect and be connected to them. When a person is not aware that they're in the presence of someone special, or they're aware they're there but they don't express it, it weakens that. So if you want inspiration, essentially, if someone sings a song, and we're talking about a song from the heart, it's a expression of the appreciation of of that which you're praising. In this case, we're talking about Hashem, God. So what do you see from this? It's definitely a connection to God, but as he's going to explain, it's an outer connection. It's through song, it's through expression. But this is only due to their outer, and you can say more outer surface level of and comprehension of the divine. It's not necessarily from the inner core and essence, like a child can tell you about their parent, which a malach can sing the praises of the parent. This malach can sing the praises of the king, but it's only the child that can really give you a taste of the very essence of the king. Well, he said, "Begufa de malka." So this is the praises. This is God's glory, God's expression. I'll explain it in a moment with a moshel, but let me just finish reading. And the excitement as well is only on an outer level. It's makif alone, meaning it's not fully integrated, it's not fully connected. It's more like a kiss as opposed to an intimate union. Ukamoi Kain. Okay, so the first thing, I'm sorry, I skipped. Ukamoi al derech moshel, ha'omed b'fnim bebeis hamelech. So this is the moshel. I was using this moshel, but he's going to spell it out now. Someone that's standing inside the house of the king, the palace. And he observes, he sees the beauty, the glory and the beauty, the precious beauty of the king's greatness. He sees it in the palace. So then when you're standing in that type of presence, you're not capable of starting to tell the story. You're not like a journalist that's watching. You're so within the moment, so you can't relate and tell the shvache, the praise of the king. Ki'im is battle bebitl primi ve'atzme el hamelach. At that point, you're standing in the presence of the king or the presence of the king's palace. You're completely absorbed and consumed in that. You're misbattle bebitl primi, and it's not like you're telling. When you're outside of the king's palace, you can say what happened. You can relate what happened. That's more continuous. Here, you're misbattle bebitl primi, which means you completely get nullified and completely consumed and absorbed in an inner type of bittul, ba'atzmi, and kor el hamelech to the king. It's only when you leave the king's presence, the palace, yedaber v'yisaper b'shvoche, then you can speak and relate and talk about his shvoche, his praises, lahafli or lahagdil, to exalt and to demonstrate the wonder and the greatness of Gedel Eitzim Shvach HaMelech, of the great and intense praiseworthy praises of the king of Shvach, compliments of the king, of the Shvach of the king, the praises of the king. Kamahu Godlu, how great he is, umispal mizeh, and get excited about it. In other words, there's a state where you are such a state of being absorbed within it, you can't even talk about getting excited, because excitement is already something that's somewhat removed. When you're not there, you could say it was an exciting experience. When you're there, you're experiencing it. So you're completely absorbed, and it's not about you talking about it or even being conscious of your excitement. You're just there. Ukamoi Kain, this muscle he now uses to explain the difference between malachim and neshamas. Ukamoi Kain hayelulim v'ashvoches v'tishboches. So too the praises and the compliments that the malachim offer through their song, hu b'chinas yediyah chitzenius bolvad. More of an outer awareness. They're aware because they've seen something that now they're talking about. B'chinas mitzias hadover, not the mahus. They're just talking about the existence of it, not that they know or perceive or see with the eye of their mind, etzem hadover, the very thing itself. They're just talking about it because they know it exists, but it's not that they're seeing it directly, like the person who's standing inside the palace. Because if they were within the experience, there wouldn't be hil v'shvach. You wouldn't hear praise and compliments. There, they would be completely nidbak, absorbed or attached, and nullified in the core, in the essence, etzem. Umasha mahalal, the fact that they do praise and speak about it, it's only because they know the outer dimension of it, that it exists, and they're excited about its existence. And they're excited in a makivdika way. So it's like hearing about it. They've heard about it. Or they're close enough in proximity to sense there's something there. But it's not being there in the fullest experience. Let me finish and then I'll stop for questions and I want to explain a few points as well. V'zeu amiris kodesh de malachim. And this is when we say in Yetzer, Brichas Yetzer, we say the Kaddish. They say Kaddish, Kaddish. The Kaddish, when they say Kaddish, the Malachim, the Liyah Shebchinas Atzmuse Eina Musag Lahem. Being that Atzmus, the core itself is not comprehensible It's not comprehended by them. That's why they say the word Kodesh. Al-Kain Emrim Kodesh. Ayeh Mekem Kvede. Kodesh means Havdalah. It's holy, it's sacred, it's sanctified. They recognize its distance. And they say, Ayeh Mekem Kvede. Where is the place of your glory? Why are they asking, where's your place? Because they're not there. They sense there's something there, but they're not in it. So they're saying, Kodesh, look how great this is. So it's like talking about the shvach of the king from so-called a distance, chitzenius. Ayeh Mekem Kvede. Where is your place? Where they're asking. The Einam Asigim Rak Sheyesh Mishu Kodesh. They don't understand the thing itself. They just know there's something that is up there, something that is beyond them. Lo Yishem Asigim Etzem Kedushasei. Not that they comprehend this very core holiness. Yizbarach. Kedushasei Yizbarach. That's Malachim. Av Yisrael Nikroim Kedeshim. Yisrael are called Kedeshim. K'meshe Kosev Yisem Kedeshim. The Malachim, you don't call Kedeshim, they're saying the Eibishter is Kadosh. Yisrael, they themselves are called the holy ones. Uksiv Kadosh Yisrael. That Yisrael is holy. Ki am Kodesh Ata. Because you're a holy nation. He's bringing different sources that even themselves, Yisrael, are called Kodesh. Ki Kodesh Ha'elyon Hu Mokar
Kodesh Yisrael. Kodesh Yisrael. Kodesh Yisrael Hashem.
Yeah. Because they're very mokar chetzvam, the place where they were chiseled from. Chetzvam is like they're a piece of the level of Kodesh Elyon. They're actually a piece of Kodesh Elyon of the supreme holiness of Hashem. They're not just praising it and describing it or saying it's great and holy. They themselves are an extension of it. And when the neshamas are excited with love to God, they become completely consumed. Well, not he says that they are consumed and nullified within the root source from where they originate. For Atzmus Ein Sof, which is the level of Kodesh Yisrael, Avaya, v'zehu lishtabe begufa demalka. And that means being absorbed, being included, encompassed. The gufa de malka, in the very body of the melech, not just in his expression. So you see here is a very fundamental page, basically a page and a quarter of describing neshamas and malachim, and neshamas being a lot higher. But nevertheless, keep in mind that the malachim support, because their gilui, when you hear someone praise God, so even though you are the level of Kodesh, like he says, it still inspires you. It's still a role model. So like we said, neshamas have this in them, but neshamas, it needs to be ignited and awakened. And that's what the malachim serve, as we shall discuss later. That's why Brich Yetzer comes before Shema. And he's going to discuss this and even ask the question later, since the neshamas are higher, if you look at the bottom of 1443, he says, and there he elaborates more on this point that we've learned already, but he's going to talk about it some more. So both are true. Similar to what we said, not similar exactly, but very different, that neshamas and Torah, which is higher, some places it says Torah is higher. So he says that's when neshamas are below. They need Torah to illuminate the path, to guide them. But neshamas in their root are higher than Torah. So not exactly the same idea, but similar, that neshamas below need an outside light to see, like an eye needs an outside light, the siyua. I want to just give an example for this from a Torah of the Baal Shem Tov that I always use. I think it really works very well in explaining many ideas, but including this one here, and then I'll stop for any questions. So the Baal Shem Tov has a Torah on the pasuk Tfilah La'ani, where it says, what's the lashon? Eshbech sichi Tfilah La'ani.
Kiyatoi, velifnei Hashem yishpoich sichoi.
Right. Tfilah La'ani kiyatov, velifnei Hashem yishpoich sichoi. So what's the meaning? So you ask the question, why is it tefillah ani? You're talking about a prayer of a pauper who's pouring his heart out. Yashpech sichi lifnei Hashem. So why is it called an ani? It should be called an oshid. Sometimes it says tefillah la'oshid. He's wealthy. He's standing before God and praising Him. And he not praising Him, rather. He's pouring his heart out to God. So the Baal Shem Tov gives a beautiful mashal. Two people were invited to see the king. One was a simple, illiterate person who didn't appreciate anything that the king was about. And another was an educated aristocrat who was very well aware of the king's greatness. So the mashal goes like this. First comes the sophisticated, educated, literate scholar. He comes to see the king. As he goes into the palace, he sees all the beautiful and amazing collections that the king has of literature, art, music, just the beauty of the palace itself. He gets so mesmerized by it all that he forgets and misses his appointment with the king. He got caught up with the chetzenius, with the king's glory, the ispashtus. Then comes the pauper. The pauper is illiterate, uneducated, doesn't know anything. He's ish pashut. The Baal Shem Tov's expression. Doesn't even appreciate. So he walks right through all these chambers, not appreciating it all. He's not affected by all this glory and all this glitz and beauty. And he goes right into his appointment and spends time with the king. And there, of course, he asks for everything, including the ability to appreciate all the king's giluyim, revelations. Says the Baal Shem Tov, when you stand before God, this is not advocating illiteracy. Rather, suspend all your education and all your knowledge and all your appreciation. Just stand like naked, like a pauper before Hashem. Then you'll experience the etzem. If you allow your intelligence and your emotions and all the giluyim, you'll experience God's expression, which is beautiful. Like I often talk about God's art, but the artist itself, you want an experience of the artist, not just the art, the one who created all this art. And that's lifnei Hashem, yishpech sichi lifnei Hashem, yishpech sichi lifnei Hashem, to reach all the way into the premius of Havaya, like he said before, ba'od Havaya. Just an example that helps understand a bit. Here he's not talking about pshittus and giluyim as much, but in a way, he's talking about the etzem and his pashtus, the difference between the neshamas and malachim. But we need both, because you also, to get to appreciate the etzem of something, you have to also appreciate what it expresses, its words, its expression. It's like saying, I want to appreciate the etzem of my teacher, but first you have to understand what he's teaching you. So this is not just jumping. That's why neshamas need malachim, and that's the role of malachim. Okay, with that we finish this paragraph, bottom of page 1435, and I'll stop if anybody wants to ask anything.
What is the makor of or the shorish of malachim? Ultimately, like what's the highest level of from which they derive? Is it arich anpin?
Who? Neshamas or malachim?
Malachim.
What he said here, I'm not looking at other Maimarim. He said they come from zivug neshikin, the kiss. They come from dibur, oisis hadibur. They come from ispashta sa'ir. Those are the words that he uses here.
Now, I read all those, but I don't mean this disrespectfully to the Rebbe, God forbid, but they're metaphors. They're not talking about and I know I shouldn't process and I shouldn't look for a map with geography, but we are doing that with the neshamas. It's the tachtim b'maitzel.
What do you mean? So here's the comparison. Neshamas is compared to dibur, neshamas is machshava. Compared to ispashtus er, neshamas is etzema er. Compared to zivug neshikin, neshamas is zivug gufni.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but
what do you?
But it's atzmi that I can get. We reach to the very top of the ladder to the very bottom part of the
I'm not sure that's the language he uses here. What do you? I'm not sure what's missing.
In the Seder Ishtalshel is that they have to have a makor. Everything has a makor.
Eisis hamachshava, eisis hadibur rather. That's a makor. Eisis hadibur. Hispashtus sa'ir. What's the makor of neshamas? according to what you understand. For neshamas is the etzem ha'er,
Yeah.
malachim is his pashtus ha'er.
Okay.
He doesn't talk about it, if you want it in spheres, he doesn't talk about it in the spheres.
That's what I meant.
Okay, but he's not talking about it in spheres, and he's not talking about it in Elamus either.
Well, right. Olamus is Bri and Yetzira, right? But that wasn't my question.
Well, this is what he says. This is what it says in the Kabbalah and Chassidus.
Isn't there any independent? I mean, just
I don't know, not from this mimer. I mean, maybe you could find another mimarim where they originate, which sphere they. I don't remember that they're connected to a particular sphere in any way.
Okay.
Remember, Michal is connected to Chesed, Gavriel to Gvura, Rafal to Tiferes. So Malachim are from all the spheres, just like Neshamas are connected to all the spheres.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But is it fair to say that the Hishpashtus, the or all the way from Atik?
No,
no?
Atik is not as Pashtus Sa'ir.
Yeah,
Atik
exactly.
is
It's Atzmi. Exactly. So it must be lower than Atik, must be Arich Anpin. It has to come from some
No,
aspect
not
to get
Arich.
there.
No, you can't say that. No. He doesn't say that. Actually, he says Neshamas are connected to Arich and to Pnimius Abba Ve'ima. They're connected to the levels called Chitzenius. Whatever way you want to go, it's a Chitzenius compared to Pnimius.
Even at the highest level before
There's no need. In Chassidus does not come, it's not like I mentioned many times, it's not a cupboard where you have physical places for things. It's a spiritual level. Malachim come from Chitzenius in contrast to the Pnimius of Neshamas.
Okay, well,
wherever that level may be.
Is it pre or is the energy
Let's take it after the class because it's something that seems to be important to you. We can talk about it afterwards. I just don't want to.
Okay.
There's.
Fair enough. I'll drop it. Thank you for responding.
Are there any other questions? Okay. So we can continue then. Yeah, the next section. One second. Yeah, let's continue here. So the next section, he's now going to go back to Krishma. Remember, in the Maimer HaMagbil Sheves, which, as I've already elaborated upon and wrote about, is the basis of a big part of this end of Hemshech Ayin Beis. That's why we learned it inside. So Shema plays an important role, because that's the contemplation of the neshama, of the nefesh alikis, in Hashem Echad, yes, preceded by Brichis Yetzer, before Shema of Malachim, that in turn, that unity, that can also impact the animal soul, the Haftas Hashem Elokecha, b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, and then climbing the different levels of love, like we learned, b'chol levavcha is mamala kalaman, b'chol nafshecha is seviv kalaman, and b'chol meidecha is atzmus, ein sof. As we learned earlier, when he spoke about hamayrik be'echad, b'chol kavanose. So he explained that idea. So he's going to go back now to Krishna and explain this level of unity, because remember, the central theme here is, in Ayin Beis, is interface. So we learned about the interface, Malmata Lamaila, for those over 500 pages until page 1349. And then he began 1350 talking about Lamaila Lamata through Torah. But in the process of Torah, we went back also to Tefillah, that's Shema, and the Neshamas. So they obviously interact with each other and they complement each other. In Torah, we also learn Mamayel Lamata, Mamat Lamayel, Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. Which part of what I'm actually writing about in the essay that I'm slowly publishing. So now he's going to go back to Krishna in this context to explain how Krishna creates this unity. Because remember, Shema, the primary focus in Shema is Hashem Echad, Achdus. So here right now, we've already discussed two levels of Achdus in a way. The Achdus that Malachim achieve is on the outer level, like a kiss. They sing the Shvach Ve'edah, the praises of God, but like they're an outside entity that's talking about something they're aware of. The Achdus, however, of Neshamas is Lishtaba Begufa de Malka. They unite directly with the king himself, to the point they can't even talk about they can't even express praise because they're completely consumed by that experience. So it's a much deeper level of Achdus. But as we're going to learn, you can't reach the deeper Achdus if you don't first reach the first level of Achdus. Because we live in a world, let's be clear, that doesn't feel Achdus altogether. We're basically not even Malak Malachim. Even though the Neshama is rooted in a deeper place, but the Neshama comes down below, we have egos, we have an animal soul, we have self-interest, we have temptations, we have distractions. We live in a material world. So even the idea of talking about God's greatness, even like Malachim, is already a chiddush for us. That's why it's important to have the Malachim, because they help spark that connection. And then you can grow to the point of reaching deeper levels of Achdus. Now later we're going to learn that there's Yichud Tata and Yichud Elah, and the Yichud of both those Yichudim. But even Yichud Tata, which you can say is somewhat like the domain of the Malachim, relatively speaking, is also a chiddush, because it means you're not focusing on yourself, you're focusing that existence is here as a result of God's creation. Like we learned earlier, the Dibur Elyon. Remember, Malachim are connected to Dibur. That is the words of God that created existence. Then from Dibur, you come to realize that Dibur is rooted in the thought of God. And the thought is rooted in the faculties, all the way to Etzem HaNefesh, all the way to Atzmus Ein Sof, like we learned, even before the Tzimtzum. And there too, there's these levels. So it's a process of how we achieve Achdus, first from a state of so-called, at least ostensible separation and even division between existence and God, to the point of becoming aware. So Shema plays a critical role, because Shema is that central prayer that comes after the Hakdamas of the prayers before it, that makes the statement, you close your eyes, you cover your eyes, you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The focus on Echad right now. But in Echad itself, as we're going to learn, there are levels. Mamata Lamayla, Mamayla Lamato. So he's now entering into that explanation to understand Shema better. But remember, we already learned Kol Amayrik Be'echad, extending the Echad, the contemplation on Echad through all these levels that I just described. And that's B'chol Kavanose, that's Kerei Gzar Din. When you say B'chol Kavanose, Chol Koiche, with all your might, with all your Kavana. And he explained what that meant. All the Kavana means the Mayrich Be'echad, that it actually also has the ability to sweeten the Gvuras and transform Shmuel to the Yamin, because you're reaching into Atik and to the highest levels where everything is one, total seamless oneness with God. So now he's going to explain this in more detail. That's a small introduction to the next section. So he says, V'hine. Now, again, I should mention that in addition to the Maimer HaMagbiel L'Sheves and the Maimer Veinenu Me'ires from the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, there's also a Maimer Yosef Avenu, which I've mentioned a number of times, that the Rebbe Rashab is basing a lot of what we're learning here, and actually some of what we're reading are quotes from there with the Rebbe Rashab's explanation. So this began on page 1408, when he spoke Yosef Venhu, Yitzarnehu ki ishen einai, that talks about the Neshamas as being the pupil of the eye. There's a mimer of the Alter Rebbe in Tovkuf Samach Zayin, that explains it, and this is a lot of what we're learning here is based on that. And when you combine the Maimer Yosef Avenu and the Maimer HaMagbiya, Mirka Hashem Elokeinu Magbiya L'Sheves, you see those two Maimarim complement each other in many ways. Especially when you learn the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer HaMagbiya L'Sheves, which we did. So we're going to start the new paragraph on the bottom of page 1435. I hope everybody got the introduction I just gave because it's very vital in understanding the link between many of the ideas that we're learning here. And this is specifically informed by what we learned already in Magbiya L'Sheves. Had we not, when we learned it the first time, I was not familiar with all the context and the bigger picture. Now I'm more familiar. So a lot of what I just said is based on that bigger picture that we derive from the other Maimarim. So it says like this now. V'hinei b'krishma yesh ramach tevin. Krishma has 248 letters. So he's talking from Shema through Vahafta. 248, well, tevin are actually words. 248 words. I think it's the whole Krishma. I have to check that out.
Yes. The whole Krishma.
The whole Krishma, all the way to Emes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So 248 words. Sorry, not letters. I thought it was. Okay. And what did that correspond with? Neged Ramach Evorin de Malka. They correspond to an expression in Zayar where it talks about God as a king. So just like a king, it's a mashal, obviously. Just like a king has a body, and that body consists of organs and limbs, 248 to be exact, and that's the 248 positive mitzvahs. But Krishma, like we're going to learn later, is klolas kol mitzvahs. So Shema has 248 words that correspond to the 248 evarim of the Malka, Gufa de Malka, remember. I think I need to explain something before we continue. Obviously, as I said, it's only a mashal, because God does not have a body and does not have limbs and organs. But since the human body was created in the divine image, so you have to say Beruchnius, you have everything we have below is there above. Just like God is also higher than 10 spheres, the 10 spheres. And yet we say there are 10 divine attributes. But the Eibishter is Lav Iu Midas Inun Klal. He's beyond all these attributes. But he chose to manifest Keich HaGvul, the Eir HaGvul, the Esser Spheres, like he says in Pasuk Eliyahu, that he manifests in the Esser Spheres Blima. Well, that's the Lashon from Sefer Yetzirah. And those are the instruments, the divine instruments with which God uses to create existence. The Eiris and Kalim. So therefore, when you talk about Lamaila, just like Eiris and Kalim in our case would be the faculties and the vessels, the limbs and organs in which those faculties reside, like the Koyach HaAyin, the power of vision, the Koyach HaRiyah rather, the power of vision in the Ayin Gashmi, in the physical eye, the power of listening in the ear, the power of Seichel in the Moyach Gashmi, and so on. So to Lamaila, there's Kavyochel, a thing called Evarim de Malka. There's the king himself, and there's his Evarim. And just like there are 248 down below, means it originates from 248 Hamshachas Lamaila, which are called Evarim de Malka. Now I should also add, if you read Tanya, Perek Chav Gimel, so there he speaks about the role of Torah and mitzvahs in helping us connect to godliness, which I think is very relevant here. Because remember, neshamas below, even though they're rooted in the Melech himself, like we said, the Gufa de Malka, in the highest levels, but when they come down below, it's concealed. Like he explains in Tanya, starting from Perek Chav, it's concealed. So even though existence comes from Dibra Elyon, God's speech, but the Tzimtzumim don't allow us to feel or see it. But Torah and mitzvahs, he explains in chapter 23, there's no hester upon him. There the tzimtzum does not affect. Why? Because mitzvahs are evarim the malka, ramach evarim the malka, the positive mitzvahs. They are essentially an extension of godliness. And then he says Torah is even higher. Because Torah is the melech himself. Evarim the malka is still evarim. They're like the body, the limbs, the organs. But then there's Torah, is when you learn Torah, you're learning Hashem's chokhmah and ratzon itself, so it's even a deeper unity. Why am I saying it's important? Because in the context of Ner Mitzvah and Torah which is the central theme of the Maimer Mika Hashem Elokeinu Magbil L'Sheves, mitzvah helps the neshama transform the body and the world, Telekus, and Torah is even a higher level than mitzvahs. So you see how it all comes together. Shema is also a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of Krishma. It's in tefillah. So it has an element of prayer, not just a pure mitzvah, but it's also prayer. But we're going to learn Shema is klolos kol ha-mitzvahs. He's going to say that later. I believe, on page 1441. He says clear, Krishma klolos kol ha-mitzvahs. So, because all the mitzvahs is to liyachid, is to connect and unite godliness to existence. Let me see if he brings there Tanya Perek Chav Gimel. I think he does, if I recall correctly. But regardless, it's definitely connected. Yeah. So what we have here is an understanding of different levels, again, of Achdus. There's the Achdus that the Malachim achieve, which is a more outer level. There's the Achdus that mitzvahs achieve. There's the Achdus of Torah achieves. Here he's not going into the distinction. Here he's just saying that Krishma is Mach Tevin, rather, 248 words, corresponding to the 248 limbs of the king. What is Malka? He says, Malka b'chinas Zah. Malka refers to the level of Zah, Shanikra Malka Kadisha, the holy king. So the level of Malka refers to Zah. Malchus is usually the queen. So if Zah is the Melech, Malchus is the Malka, the queen. But here Malka is not with the hey. Malka here is in Aramaic. Malka b'chinas Zah, Shanikra Malka Kadisha. And what's the Ivar in the Malka? What are the limbs or the organs of the king? Like, for example, with a human. The Ivarim are not like garments that you dress in and you could take it off and put it on. The Ivarim are very much part of the essence of the goof of the person. So even though they are called Evarim, but they're one with the body. The same thing, the extensions or the limbs or organs of Zah, they're the very core, they're part of the very guf and muchus and personality and essence of Zah. And now he's going to explain what that means. And how Shema, Krishma, through his 348 words, helps us connect to the Evarim, the Malka of Hashem. On a very simple level, just to give you what he says in Tanya, when you stretch out your hand, Yad Mechalek Zdaka, to give charity to someone, your hand is becoming a merkava, like a vehicle to God's hand, to God's chesed. Chesed is an Ever, like Ru'usa Diyamina. We say that in Pasuk Eliyahu. The right arm is chesed. The left arm is gvura. So your arm becomes an extension of God's arm because you have now aligned your guf, your aver called the hand, to become an extension of God's chesed, the mitzvah of chesed. And the same thing with every positive mitzvah. It takes that corresponding aver. Every mitzvah has every one of the 248 mitzvahs, positive mitzvahs, has a corresponding limb or organ. You're learning Torah, your mind is becoming a vehicle for Chochmah Bina Das Lamaila, of the mind of God, which is another aver, the brain, the mind, and the same thing with every positive mitzvah. So that's what mitzvahs do. And all of them are encompassed in Krishma, because Krishma is the central liturgy, central prayer of Hashem Echad. And that's what he's going to explain now. So I'll just begin where he says, Ubira inyan. I'll just read one line just to get it going. Explanation of this inyan, who apim mashakosa b'mokem acher. Based on what it says elsewhere, b'inyan ramach pikudin, ramach evarin de malka. The b'mokem acher seems to me, Perek Chav Gimel of Tanya, but maybe he was referring to more, somewhere where it's more elaborate. I'm not sure. That, but the ramach pikudin means the 248 mitzvahs, positive mitzvahs, are ramach, are the 248 evarin de malka, like the 248 evarin de malka that we just spoke about. Why? Mitzvahs, because now through mitzvahs, who? Shenimshach is yichud kudsha bricha v'shechinta. Top of page 1436. Because through mitzvahs, what do we cause through mitzvahs? The yichud of kudsha bricha and the shechina. Kudsha bricha is elikus, that's higher than existence. Kudsha bricha, and shechina is like malchus, connecting it to the shechina. That's why we say in the morning, before Baruch Shema, we say l'shem yichud kudsha bricha v'shechinta. There's some people who say that before every mitzvah, but the Samach to Samach, the Rebbe Rashab explains, we say it once and it applies to every mitzvah. We don't have to say it every time. But it's the idea that all mitzvahs come to unite the divine with existence. Basically, the divine that's higher than existence, Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvos V'Tzivanu, with the divine within existence, which is Shechina. Essentially the theme of Ayin Beis. And now the next piece is going to be a longer elaboration on what is Kudsha Bricha and what is Shechina in this context of union, of unity. And that will bring us back to Shema. So I'm going to see here, again, I'm going to probably do more of a summary here than read everything, simply because I want to keep on script of the central theme of what we're learning here. And I don't want to digress too much, even though, to be honest, nothing is a digression. It's all part of the understanding. But since we learned it already, I'm going to try to focus mostly on the thread that connects it all, and as opposed to going to every detail in elaborate detail, which we already did the first time we learned this. So I'm going to stop here, top of page 1436. And we have entered in the zone of Ramach, Ivarin de Malka, through the 248 words of Shema and 248 mitzvahs, as we shall learn. Okay. Any questions?
And the 365 mitzvahs losase are there to prevent blockages rather than to promote the flow and connection?
That's one way to put it. That's one part of it. The 365 mitzvahs leisa are connected. It says the same Chazal says connected the shasa gidim. The gidim are like the nerves or the sinews.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Kutei Torah, Pekudei, he talks about it. They're leisa set. They're the to do nots, which is like, in a way, like you said, it's either to remove, like just like you have to nourish your body, you also have to avoid things that are toxic, that are damaging. That's on a very basic level, but it goes a lot deeper than that when you start learning the Maimorim, what the Leisa said do. But I don't want to go there. It's a very different topic.
I understand.
There are Maimorim, I said, Pekudei and Likutei Torah, and that talk about it. And some ways the Loisa said reach even deeper than the Mitzvah Sesa, because they're through not doing it, as he explains there. So it reaches deeper levels in some cases. But Mitzvah Sesa, the primary thing to keep in mind is the positive mitzvah does take your aver. It actually unites it. Where Loisa Seh is more like you said, either avoiding a disconnection, like an aver, to avoid the disconnection. With a mitzvah esa is more of creating the connections between our evarim and the evarim de malka, which are the mitzvahs, the 248 positive mitzvahs.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I always wondered this because there's such an emphasis on Kriyas Shema in the this section of Ayin Beis, and of course in the manuscripts that you're writing to tie together the unanswered questions. And it almost seems like it's too simple. I mean, it's such a heavy concept to focus on Achdus Hashem and the Yichud, and Yichud Ila, Yichud Tata, and all these. I mean, the most noble, profound concepts of Chassidus Chabad. And yet, I mean, Avos Kriya Shema is central, obviously, to all of Yiddishkeit. So I don't mean to minimize it, but it's almost as though you could say, someone reading this on the surface could say, okay, all I need to do is say Shema and have the right contemplation, and I'm done. It's kola mitzvos, and I'm good to go. So I mean, I know it's like saying which is more important, learning or doing mitzvahs, and they say learning because learning inspires action, so you get the best of both worlds. I'm guessing there's some similar explanation about Kriyas Shema, but on the surface, it seems as though you do this one mitzvah and you've got your bases covered.
Does anybody have an answer to this question? You could ask the same question about any Maimer Chassidus. When you learn a Maimer about Pesach, it talks about how Pesach opens the doors to everything. Then you learn a Maimer about Sukkot, and it says Sukkot opens the doors to everything. And then learn about a Maimer about Shavuos, Matan Torah, and you say Matan Torah is the biggest thing that ever happened. So the answer is that there are many ways to connect to God. And they are all different parts of our Avodah, different mitzvahs, different holidays. The Rebbe always says that's because on Pesach, the Shar, the gate through which everything travels, is Yetzias Mitzrayim. On Shavuos, it's through Matan Torah. On Sukkot, through Simcha and Sukkot. So every place you're going to learn is going to be focusing on that. And anyone who learns something proper is like, you don't learn one pasuk in the Torah. There's one pasuk that talks about one mitzvah, and then there's another pasuk that talks about another mitzvah. And each one is going to focus on the greatness of that mitzvah. And when you're doing that mitzvah, that's what should be your focus. Also, bear in mind that Krishma is coming now at pages 1400. Anyone who learned Ayin Beis knows that 1400 pages before Krishma. And the Rebbe Rashab spoke about Shema a number of places. But when you learn the whole Hemshech Ayin Beis, no one will ever come to the conclusion that you just say Shema for 5 minutes and you have a connection. You have to learn 1400 pages of a very difficult avodah. I mentioned tefillah in general, then Torah, yes, and there's mitzvahs, and all the different aspects of vahafta and so on. In addition, when you learn this, I come away the exact opposite. Then when I learn this, I'm overwhelmed. How big Krishma is. Krishma is number one. Before that, you need Brichas Yetzer. And before that, you need Psukkah de Zimra. And then in Shema itself, first you need Shema Hashem Elokeinu, and Hashem Echad, and Baruch Shem. And then you come to Vahafta, that you can affect the animal soul. And then you go to B'chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, B'chol Meidecha. And now he's talking about 248 words. So I look at it really, that this is actually, he's expanding it to become this.
All-encompassing.
You can understand the centrality of Krishma, because Krishma, like I said, but he's going to say a little later, is Klolos Kol HaMitzvos. It's not a small thing. It's actually the essence of all of Torah, which is Hashem Echad. So that's my take on the whole picture.
I wasn't, God forbid, I wasn't trying to minimize. I was trying to provoke that answer I just got, which was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So good. Fine.
Also, I think it's also
if all
about
the
having a
questions are just to
relationship.
provoke me, I'm fine with that.
No, I provoke you in a positive way, not to irritate you, but to get.
No, I'm saying, I just said, if it's all to provoke a deeper understanding, great. But
That's all. That's all.
Okay. But there are sometimes questions that want an answer, that beg an answer, not just an explanation. Okay, fine. Are there any other questions before we?
Just to add to Yitzchak's point, I think also it's not just about connection, but it's also about having a relationship, which makes the connection even stronger. So it's like he's saying, you go to the Yechidus, but even with the Rebbe, let's put Hashem on the side for a second. Yes, you're going to have an amazing experience and you connected and you see him face to face, but it's different than if you were to spend time with the Rebbe day in and day out and have a relationship with him.
Okay, that's good.
Provoke wasn't the right word. Spark was what I meant, Rabbi. Please Accept my apologies.
they're both. I'm fine with both. By the way, I'm not. They're both good.
Okay.
Okay. So,
You're still recording, FYI.
yeah, I'm going to stop here.